Hello and welcome back to Shelve Your Boots. I'm Katie, the face behind Shelve Your Boots, and this week we've got the hardest woman to get hold of in NATO, Rachel. Very busy lady, so thank you for making some time in your diary for this. You're all over LinkedIn at the moment and all over many different media outlets at the moment. But for those who haven't seen you, if you could just give a little intro to yourself, and we'll get to why you're so popular at the moment.
I wouldn't go that far. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me on. Yeah, I did 24 years service. Many years of that deployed on operations from Northern Ireland, Bosnia, Kosovo, Iraq, Afghanistan, and I find myself in the spotlight at the moment because of LawFare and the recent sort of incidents that have been in the press and reported on regarding our Prime Minister and the pro bono work he did for Phil Shiner.
Yeah. Yeah, you've been very much at the forefront of this in from a sort of veteran and military personnel point of view, because you yourself had a personal interaction at this with this issue that wasn't very pleasant, and pretty much has become the fuel to your fire for this fight. Um, can you explain to people kind of sort of what you went through at that time, and that's essentially the essence of what lawfare is and what we're looking at today.
Yeah, certainly. I left in 2013, started my resettlement journey, and was lucky enough to find a role within Barclays at that time, supporting what was their military program, the AFTER program. Really, really great role, especially from a transitioning perspective, because we was helping support other veterans and actually guys at that point who were in rehab from Headley Court, to bring them in to do 2-3 weeks work placement, give them a new insight and opportunities to careers that they wouldn't have even thought of. So life was good. I was living in Canary Wharf. I just finished a career transitional event. I was with a colleague and got a call from my work mobile with an introduction from somebody who was part of IAT, which is the or was the Iraqi historic allegations or accusations team, as I like to call it, and asking me to give a statement against a ex-colleague. I'd obviously been following the news at that period. The investigations was in the news. Soldiers had been reported for doing X, Y, Z, and it was very topical. And I sort of said to the guy, "Look, I know that person, but I have nothing of an evidential nature to give regarding any investigations that you're doing on them. So I'll politely decline." And at which point he said, "Well, we can force you." And I said, "Well, if you want to force me, then let's do it properly, and I will engage with the solicitor. Are you telling me that I need to engage with the solicitor?" No, no. And I said, "Look, follow it up with an email. I'll have a think about it. But as I said, I've got nothing to really say. I wasn't in the same location as that person. So what do you actually want from me?" And that's pretty much how the call ended. And that was in the October of 2013. I'd only been out, 6 months at that point.
Yeah.
Anyway, it disturbed me slightly. I mean, I was in a position where I was working with senior people in the MOD, and I remember and recall having a conversation with the general at the time. After the conversation, said, "I don't think it's an appropriate way of making contact with veterans, given the fact that some of the veterans probably that they're speaking with would have seen and dealt with some quite horrific things whilst they were deployed, and that in itself can trigger events." And for me, it unsettled me. So I was like, this is surely wrong. And he agreed and said, "I'll speak with the person who's in charge and make sure this doesn't happen. You should at least get a letter requesting you maybe to give a statement if you've got anything to say, as what you would expect, normal process." And yeah, months went by, and then around January the 10th, it was 6 o'clock in the morning. I was debating whether to get up, and anybody who's familiar with sort of the Canary Wharf area at that time of day and that month, it's pretty bleak, and the wind was hurling around, and I was like, oh no, I'm not going to bother. And then I just had this massive knock at the door, and it startled me a bit, and I'm like, wasn't sure whether it was somebody like a bin had banged on it or something, and I heard some noises, and I said, "Who's there?" And someone called back saying that they were in the Navy Police. Is that Captain Webster? And I was like, no, it's not Captain Webster. Anyway, I put my dressing gown on, ran down the stairs because I'd only been out the military a short period, and I thought, well, maybe one of my old team or some soldiers might have put me down as their executor of their will, or contact details. And I opened the door ajar, and then just this about 5, 6 men entered my house, and where my position of the door was sort of pushed me into the living room area. And it was just literally shock. And I recall, I'm sure some of your audience may remember the bill. There was always this dodgy copper in the bill called Burnside, long trench coat type. That's how I remember and perceive this guy. He was it was a mixture of people in the house who were wearing navy uniforms and civilian clothes, and this guy at the back was like, you've been arrested for misconduct in public office, which as we can, I think many people will be familiar with that term of recent days because of everything what's been going on in the with regards to Mandelson, etc. And I was like, what? You have got no right to be here, where's the Met policeman? And where's your warrant? Obviously,
Yeah.
I never touched on it, but first 13 years of my career was in the military police, so I sort of have a bit of understanding of law. But I guess everyone out there listening will know that as well. You can't just go into somebody's house without due process, and then subsequently take them away. So a heated conversation ensued, and I basically said, I ain't going anywhere with you. And I made a run for my stairs, and literally I recall somebody trying to grab hold of me, and I just got to my bedroom, at which point I was just forced onto the bed, hands behind my back, literally cuffs on. I'm like, now I'm scared because this is, I knew it was wrong. I'm on my own, and I'm being handcuffed by people who have got no right to do that. And my dressing gown had come undone. I remember pleading with this guy saying, please let go. Well, if you behave yourself, we will. And I'm like, this, even the terminology, even though when I recall it now, I realize, what were they actually thinking?
Yeah.
Anyway, I said, yes, okay, I'm fine. You behave yourself. Yes, yes. And they left the room, and then two Navy females then came into my bedroom and literally watched me get dressed. I had nothing on, and the humiliation of that in itself. It was 6 o'clock in the morning. These things had happened. I'd not brushed my teeth, not gone to the toilet. I'm now frog marched out my house, not knowing where I'm going, knowing that they've got no right on me. It felt literally like I was being kidnapped. And I recall getting put into the back of the van, the door slamming, and literally I just broke down in tears. I had no idea what on earth was going on. It was like shock capture. And there was a female in the front of the van, and a guy, and obviously it was a proper like a rest stop. There was blue lights and everything, and my neighbours were outside, the humiliation of it all. And then, we're driving out of London. I still have no idea where they're taking me. And I'm thinking, well, I'd heard on the news that some soldiers had been taken to Paddington, processed there. So I thought, oh, I'll be going to a police station. No, I remember going over Tower Bridge and thinking they're taking me out of London. At this point, I don't know why, but I kept saying it. I wanted water. Can I have some water? No. I was like, right, well, can I go to the toilet? No, you're going to have to wait. Well, how far are we going? Wait, you'll find out when we get there. And it was all this like cloak and dagger type stuff. And I'm like, you know what? And I remember at that point also seeing images where in the press where soldiers had been accused of not looking after Iraqis correctly and not giving them food, water, treating them with dignity, humiliate, and all that. And I'm thinking, you're doing exactly what you're accusing these soldiers of to me and in the UK.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was the initial bit, and then I eventually get to where they're taking me, which is Portsmouth Naval Detention Centre. Doors open. I mean, I look like something off Jeremy Kyle right now. Hairs everywhere. I've been crying. Got my hoodie on. I look, not like it care again. I just felt drained, exhausted, in a state of what you get taught on in the military. Shock capture, duress. They do this to you, so you will act a certain way. And there was this big sergeant major, Navy sergeant major, who greeted me when I came out of the van. He said, "Are you okay?" And I went, "No." And he said, "Look," he said, well, he was obviously the detention sergeant major. So
Yeah.
I later found out that, people had been ordered basically to process me because I'm not supposed to be going into a Navy
Yeah.
detention centre. I'm a civilian.
Yeah.
Have got no right on me. And he was really kind, and he just basically said, "Look, go to the doctors, get checked out. You banged your head on the way down, didn't you?" Said, "I need the toilet." Went to the toilet, blah blah blah. And then it gets into this custody cell, and at this point now there's maybe 10, 12 mixture of the detention staff and the arresting staff, and then there's another couple of Burnsides at the back, and I'm just me there, and this guy at the back says, "Get her in the cell." And I remember looking at all these young lads at the front, and I said, "You touch me now and force me in one of the cells, and I'm telling you, I'll have your pensions, because what they've done to me today is illegal." Words to that effect. And they all stood firm. And the sergeant major basically said, "Everybody get out." And he sat me down and said, "Look, I don't know what's going on. I know, basically said in so many words that he didn't want to process me, but was told to process me. And you'll be looked after." And at that point, I was still a smoker. And they said, "There's the exercise yard, there's your cell. I'll try my best to get you out as much as possible." I mean, who wants to go outside in January? But I sat there like, gibbering, because I just didn't want the humiliation of being locked into a cell. I'd
Yeah.
never, the only time I've ever been in a custody cell like that was when I was R&P and I was collecting a soldier who was pretty pleased to see me from a German cell. And it was just, yeah, that was the initial start of it all. And I remember then, around that conversation, one of the IAC guys who were, civilian, these IAC guys who weren't in uniform were ex-CID types, and they were, now I know on quite a lot of money a day, 600 odd, £700 a day to investigate and behave how they had behaved towards me.
Yeah.
And he tapped me on the shoulder, this guy, and he went, and basically said, "Do you want a duty solicitor then?" And I just wanted to, and they got me into the mindset, as we talked about the duress and how they get into your head. And I went, "Yes, let's just get it over with," because I knew I had nothing to say. And then he went, "Yeah, sorry about earlier, it was just due process." And at that point, I went,
Yeah.
"Cancel your duty solicitor." And then luckily, through the network you have in the military, somebody I'd managed to get my phone, and a friend said to me, "Look, go and contact a guy called Bob Scott, who used to be in the SIB in the RMP many years ago. Had trained as a lawyer, and he was in Salisbury, so he came down and acted as my legal representation for the duration I was at Portsmouth." Yeah. And
It's
then,
mind blowing. I mean, in that position, going through your head. I mean, it's just wild because like you say, it's 6 o'clock in the morning. What? I'm a civilian. I have been for 6 months. Why the hell have I got military police at my door at 6 a.m.? They're now in my house. I'm now in a wagon. Where the hell am I going? It's almost like a fever dream. Like what?
yeah.
What the? you know, you get to a point like, no, this is real, this is happening,
Yeah.
this is what's happening. And I can't imagine, like in my head, I can't even imagine what that's like. But the in my head, you know, you could easily start to spiral at that point of
Yeah,
what is
for
happening.
sure.
What are they going to do to me? Does anyone know I'm here? Is anyone in control of these people? Is this just a rogue thing? Is this an actual operation? Who is in control here? Who's actually overseeing this? Who's in power here? Because all of this is wrong and
Mm.
shouldn't happen. And
Y-
now I'm sat in a locked building with these people. What the hell is going to happen next? Like,
Exactly, yeah. And that's pretty much what was going through my mind on the way down to Portsmouth. I was like, who's made, it just didn't feel real. And then thinking, who's made something up about me? And, you know, and then obviously, whilst I had there and had a moment of clarity, I obviously put it back to the call that I'd received in the October. And when we started going through the interview process, like, he was like, Rachel, it's a no comment interview. Put it to them. He said, this was a ruse for you to get Rachel to talk about the colleague you asked her to talk about. And you could have done this in a different manner. There was no need for you to take such extreme measures of taking her out of her house at 6 o'clock in the morning and humiliating her, only to get her to a point of duress where she tells you stuff that you think she knows, and she has no knowledge. She only knows that person personally. So that was that, really. It was a no comment interview. 14 hours later, I was released. Thankfully, Bob dropped me off at the
yeah,
train station because I had no money to
yeah,
get back to
yeah,
London. And I had a friend that I immediately went to stay with who gave me that chat that I needed, because I had no idea. I recall ringing up then one of the military support charities. It was a weekend and nobody answered. And I know all those processes and things have now changed because of 24-hour numbers. But at that time there was no one for me to talk to. I rang up the Samaritans. I just felt like my whole life
yeah,
had collided into this like nightmare. and
yeah,
um and actually, what was worse for me, I'd only just started work at Barclays. I, on my own, I had no other person to rely on for paying the bills. And I went back to work on the Monday,
yeah,
and tried to work as normal as I possibly could. I didn't tell anybody about my arrest, apart from a dear colleague at work. Didn't tell my family, because the immediate reaction by anyone is, well, what did you do? And I'm like, I didn't do anything,
yeah. It
because,
doesn't warrant that kind
well,
of behavior.
yeah, and that was the thing, humiliation, trying to explain it to people. So 6 months on, I said to my folks, when I knew that, we were progressing with the sort of paperwork side of things, because Bob was still my solicitor and advocate, pursuing the admission of unlawful arrests in detention. And it took over 2 years to get that. Now, in that 2 years, that's a long, long time. And it was a long, long time where I closed that black box and sealed it up. And when we got the letter to say that they admitted unlawful arrest and detention, it got picked up by the press in the 2016, and literally the headline, I couldn't write a better headline, kidnapped by the state, and it was ran initially by the Daily Telegraph. And I did go onto various media channels at that point, not for anything more than to shine a light on what was still going on in 2016, which was to stop it happening. And we all get the fact that some things happened out there and they need to be investigated correctly in line with process. But even that, individuals should be done in a timely manner with due process. you know I use and coined this phrase, you don't go and knock an orchard of the ripest fruits down to get a couple of bad apples. And that's what they were doing, and
Kicking a
people
horse
were
in the head.
fearful. Yeah, people were fearful of getting a knock on the door because not only that, it was at that time where there was a real increase in suicides as well. And I still to this date believe that those inquiries and those knocks on the door and those letters received set a catalogue of events going in certain with certain people, and one of the reasons I wanted to voice it back then was to say it must stop. It didn't obviously gain the traction it needed, and I tried to get pro bono at that point. another another word that's been coined over the past few weeks, with the Prime Minister allegations, and I'm sure we'll cover that shortly.
Yeah.
But to go against the institution of the MOD and the government, you need more than pro bono. No one's going to give up all that time and effort for you because it's a beast of an organization. So I just quietly went back into the shadows with it. I'd got my little bit of compensation for the unlawful arrest and detention. I proved my innocence, as my great grandma used to say, truth always prevails. And it took its toll on me
Yeah.
because when it went into the press, that black box that I'd had sealed up opened up because people was reaching out to me saying, "Hey, Rach, didn't realize this is shocking, terrible," and then I had like a delayed experience of betrayal trauma, more recently diagnosed with like the moral injury side of things, which accumulates with all the sort of under that mental health umbrella with the PTSD, etc. So it took its toll, but thankfully I was in an organisation such as Barclays that had the most exceptional medical cover, and I was able, and I'm very lucky for that, to go straight into counselling once I realised I needed it. And it was a colleague simply sat next to me, had listened to a conversation I was having with a project manager, probably raised my voice a little bit, and he said, "Rachel, are you okay?" And I went, "Yes, why?" I said, "Well, you seem a bit different since it all came out in the press." He said, "Maybe you should speak to someone." And I went, "You know what? I will." And that was the sort of catalyst for change I needed, because during the 2 years, I'd started on a spiral of unhealthy habits. I was still smoking heavily, drinking, eating bad foods, not looking after myself, lost dear friendships because of probably behaviours that were not longer me. Rachel sort of disappeared for a while, and it took a lot of soul searching to sort of try and get back on track, and I did that with therapy.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing. It's, like you say, in terms of sort of the mental health side of things, and that kind of situation, is crazy anyway. Even if you're mentally fine with how you were in the, at that point, you could have been absolutely fine. But for that to happen alone will cause issues, because then you're on a knife edge every day because that
Yeah,
came out of nowhere essentially. But then, you look at people who have had trauma or issues or mental health issues that have left the army to give themselves that space and to sort of get better, are then ricocheted back into those
mm,
feelings without warning or anything, and having to go through those emotions of, you know especially myself, leaving for me was like, oh, thank God, I needed to get out, to be then ricocheted back into it and under a shock of capture and all the rest of it, and being, dragged into it. I think I'd just implode at that point. I don't think my mind would cope at that point,
it
because
would.
it's, you're always
You
on that
would, and you're
shoestring.
strong.
You're always on that
Yeah,
bungee. Like, you can easily find yourself just
yeah.
digging your back in, and you know what? You thought you were out, but you're not. And
But I think you don't realise your inner strength and your your inner
yeah,
resilience until you put, you know, it right in the middle of it. And I think, coin a phrase from Margaret Thatcher, I think the strength of a woman, you don't realise the strength of a woman like I can't remember the tea bag thing, the hot water till a woman's put into hot water, and it's true. You get that inner strength. You get that inner strength. And I had that always in the back of my mind. Truth prevails. I haven't done anything wrong. This is wrong. What they've done. They shouldn't have come into my house. They shouldn't have taken me the way they did. They shouldn't have. They shouldn't have put me in a cell. There was no warrant. There was no. There was no. They had no jurisdiction on me. So I knew I was. I knew I was on the right side. But it was a time, and the constant messaging backwards and forwards with the legal and going, oh, they've said this, and you're like, what? And it was just never ending, and it was the
Game,
longest 2 years.
the game
Um,
start, yeah,
yeah,
and I think
and
one thing with the military that they wholly rely on is, you ricochet back into that, and you instantly go into that mindset of just do as you're told, just sit down,
yeah,
and that same. Whereas yourself, when actually, no, I want to phone this person. Whereas a lot of people wouldn't have done that, and like you say, it's an arduous battle at that point, because then the games continue. Like they start to
mm,
say stuff, and you're like, well, where's that come from? Because I don't remember that, and you're just constantly on this game. It feels like that they're playing, that's trying to get you to sort of comply to something, like you say, that I've not done. What's your end game here with
yeah,
bombarding me with all this crap? Surely that's a waste of effort and time. Go and chase something that's actually worth it. Like,
yeah,
but it almost feels like, and I think sometimes with that side of it in the military, is like they just won't take no for an answer because they can't handle the word no. We must be right. We're going to continue. We're going to continue, and we're just going to weigh you down, and hopefully
yeah.
we'll just get the answer
Go
we want,
away.
because we're right. You're wrong.
Yeah,
We're right, and won't admit. And if they do, it's through gritted teeth, and they won't look you in the eye that they were wrong about what they were doing.
exactly. Yeah, and I still think now, looking back, when they sent me that letter to the solicitor, yeah, we admit unlawful arrest and detention. You know what? There was not like you want an apology, but what would have been, you know, great at that point, for example, is to have gone and spoken to somebody and got lessons learned, so other people didn't suffer the way I did. I mean, I was very grateful that I had Johnny Mercer, champion getting IAT closed down and and used quite a lot of the evidence I had built up against IAT when he went to do the inquiry, and certain key people asked questions, regarding what had happened to me, and I cannot confirm or deny was, I think, their favourite response. But thankfully, due to his perseverance and his dedication to the veteran community, managed to get the IAT closed down to a degree with only a few cases open. But then, fast forward a few more years, then we've got a similar thing going on with the Afghan inquiry. So not only did I have to go through and deal with the IAT one, I'm now in a better place. I'm training well. I'm sort of in a recovery state, and I'm away overseas. I think it was 2022. My mum and dad get a letter regarding an Afghan inquiry saying if you do not comply to this, you can face prison. Because obviously they'd sent the letter to, which is aligned to my army pension address,
Yeah.
which I've always kept at my folks. So they found me that way. My mum's ringing me up in tears. Oh, Rachel, not again, not again. I'm like, calm down, it's okay. Which obviously I was really, really angry about. And that my mum was so upset because she'd known what I'd gone through on the first sort of incident, and trying to talk my dad to take a photo with his iPhone. I was like, oh gosh. Anyway, eventually got a copy of it. Yeah, eventually
I
got a
need a photo
copy
of
of
your
it.
face, Dad. I need the document.
Yeah, yeah. And managed to, luckily, because I still had connections with Johnny Mercer, to say, Johnny, please, can you help me with this? I'm overseas. I have no idea what this is about. And he helped put a stop to that. Now, I was in a lucky position because I'd had that connection with him because of the IAT one. And but what about other people? You
Yeah.
know what? But I think that's what has is my driving force.
Yeah.
It isn't about me. It's like, how are other people affected by this? People who, I saw from my last battalion, One Rifles, you the devastating impact of the soldiers getting killed and the serious injuries of what they were left with, and then the sort of the that band of brothers experience the trauma that is not just that person, one person impacted, it's the whole team. And you think, what they faced and gone through, and that's always in my mind, is like, these guys have gone through the mill, and now you're then sending out these letters, but they have no idea of the trauma and the visual things that they have gone through whilst they have been deployed. And that is what is wrong, is how they get in touch with you. They sent a random letter to my parents' house. That could have caused, well, it did cause them stress, but that was just me. You fancy getting that letter, and you're 10, 15 years pass, you've gone through your therapy, you've put everything to bed, what's happened in Afghan, the visual, the explosions, the bombs, the freaking bullets, everything, watching your friend getting killed, and all of a sudden you get sent this letter,
Yeah.
where you might be just called as a witness, but the catalogue of events that can then cause is just horrendous. And this is what they don't get,
Yeah.
because the people in charge of all these investigations, as we talked about before you press record, have not lived and breathed it, because then you would have a different slant on how they approach veterans, because there would be a different lens on it, and go, right, okay, shall we just check his military record or her military record? Is there any links to PTSD on their medical record? Have they gone through, where have they been, and have an understanding of it, and have the right approach to make contact with them,
Yeah.
maybe through the regiment, maybe through family's office, but have a right approach where people are not getting this shock of opening a letter.
You're right, and I think what this, from my point of view, in terms of how people are being treated and all the rest of it, I think it is the really ugly end, but I think it really highlights, if anything, as well, kind of the treatment of normal transition as well. And it's at the
Yeah,
real ugly end of, like you say, it's just this letter that's dropped on your doorstep, and I think it really highlights the level of care that isn't there. The moment you walk out that gate in your civvies, your car's packed up, and it's like, see ya. There's no
mm,
concern, there's no worry, there's just nothing there anymore. There's no support, and we've spoken about this before. Like the support that's there is, well, we've done a bit. It's minimal. We've shown effort, kind of vaguely in that direction, and it's not. There's no system set up to support us on the outside for various different things, whether it is just from finding a job, but to also this end of the spectrum of
mm,
being part of these investigations, and everything that comes with is just, it goes back to, well, you're on your own now, crack on, and you just
yeah,
have to deal with it. And then you get these pockets of isolation where people are on their own and then dealing with it. And like you say, in your situation, frightened to tell anyone, frightened to have conversations about it, because let's face it, to say you've been ripped out your bed at 6 a.m., the first question people ask is, well, what have you done?
mm,
That's the
exactly, yeah.
automatic reaction to, like, well, they must have had a reason to do that. Well, they didn't. That's the
Mm.
problem. But the
I
assumption
know
is
you could.
they're in the right.
Could write a Netflix series on this one, I tell you.
That's it.
Anyone out there that's interested in my story, let me know.
Yeah,
No, but on a serious note, what you're just saying there, I think there is a lot more support out there, dare I say, but it's so disjointed,
yeah,
and it doesn't actually get to the people that actually need it.
yeah,
All these great initiatives that they've got, multi-million-pound initiatives, I think we spoke about it before we press record. Um, it's not getting to the guy and the girl who is in current crisis until it's too late. But I mean, that's a different conversation for another day.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I guess really what the point of where we're at today, and how I ended up getting into, I suppose, the spotlight with all this was, we've got to thank the government for it, I suppose. On the 10th anniversary of my arrest, I put a post out on LinkedIn, which was basically just to say, you know what, I'm feeling good. This is 10 years and I haven't got that anxiety feeling, because I think you touched on it before. When I did get going through the recovery phase, and the understanding of, how I was feeling, there was, I had paranoia. I had a heightened sense of alertness, because any bang, I was just on this. My cortisol levels was up here, and the paranoia was also up here, because I thought I was getting followed all the time, and everything. Anyway, as I say, worked through it all, and then this year, it was the first year where I've sat there and not really thought about it, which is a massive sort of achievement. Still always in the back of your mind, triggers do happen, and put out there, because I'd seen on various social media platforms about individuals who have been arrested recently, suffering out there. And I thought, well, it would be great if I could find a community of individuals that have suffered lawfare. And for those that, to coin a phrase, lawfare, for those that don't know it, is sort of, I haven't got the absolute definition, but those of us who have been subjected to enduring investigations over a prolonged period of time with no outcome, and been accused of anything. And like I say, I've touched on it earlier, even those guys who have been accused of something, and it's been proven that it's not guilty, they're still within that bracket, because not only have they been investigated once, they've been investigated twice, 3 times, 4 times in some cases. So it's a constant that, and we're not just talking Iraq, we're going back to even Bosnia, Northern Ireland, Iraq, Afghanistan, and any other conflict, or any other sort of individual, maybe Kosovo as well. So there is individuals out there that have had a touch point on lawfare through all those campaigns, and a lot are hidden still or don't want to come forward. And then there's individuals that have come forward to explain what has happened in their lives as a result of those investigations. Their careers have changed. Their family dynamics have changed. They have, someone that I know, was probably top 10% in the officer community, got arrested, and took 2-3 years for them to say that there was no case to answer. That had a massive effect on his career. Went a total different way to what he would have done. He would have probably been a general or something, So, and similar with me, when I got arrested, I'd applied for different jobs in the bank prior to my arrest, because the initial job that I was on was only like a 12-month secondment, so I was looking for a permanent job within Barclays. And when I got offered a role, I declined it, because I didn't think I would the ability and the bandwidth to deal with it. So and therefore relationships as well suffered. So I wanted to try and forge a community and find a platform for a safe space for individuals to come together, knowing that nothing's going to get screenshotted, no, it's going to get shared, we're all in it together type thing, because I'm much further ahead than some people who are only maybe just on their recovery phase, and that's what I wanted. Never did I then anticipate, a few days later, the Daily Telegraph running a story about our Prime Minister doing pro bono work for Phil Shiner. Of which was one of the reasons why I was taken out of my house at 6 o'clock in the morning, because he had given a view on a case which was involving this colleague, ex-colleague. And then the journalist who released that story was the same journalist who covered my initial story back in 2016. So had requested then for me and a few others to give a comment. And of course, how can you not be disappointed to know that the Prime Minister has actually impacted your life considerably
Yeah.
by the pro bono work he gave to the disgraced Phil Shiner. Of course,
And
it's
only
disappointing.
and
It's
only
not even
because you
disappointing. It's it again evokes a lot of emotions, a lot of disappointment,
but only
more
six
feeling of
was it six
betrayal.
weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, he moved the, you're gonna get dragged back in World War III to 65.
Yeah, I mean, you know
He's kind
what?
of
I
done
actually
that.
would do
And then
that though. Do you know
he's
what I
kind of,
mean?
yeah, I mean, which is, but it's like you've done that pro bono work, but then and
Yeah.
chased these people down, but then have gone, "Oh, actually, we do want you back though, if we need you." It's that element of it. It's like, really, which is it then? Which is
I
it?
think
Which
what was,
which
I
which
think
lane are
was
you going to play in?
Yeah, I think what was more uncomfortable was, I think 2 days before the article released, I mean, I think it would have been more impactful if it just waited to release that story when he'd come back from China, because I think it got hidden away with the China visit, the positive stuff he was supposed to be doing out there. But a couple of days before he'd gone to China, I think he was there giving it, our forces are the best in the world. And, yes, they were on the front line, and we know that. But there he was, grandstanding it, saying how great we were in, support, coming out against Trump. And then a few days later, we then discover, well, actually, you were happy to do pro bono work to get some of us investigated and face years and years of lawfare. And I just found that so, the duplicity of it was just like, whoa, and so disappointing, disgraceful in fact. And then only in a couple of days ago, again, the Veterans Office coming out with they initially denied that he'd worked with Phil Shiner, and then they had to backtrack again, saying, well, actually, he did. And, that in itself, again, you've got this office at Parliament who are supposed to be supporting the veteran community, and all I see them doing is being aligned to keeping their whip and supporting whatever the government wants, instead of, like, I know somebody like Johnny Mercer would have resigned at some of the things that has gone on. Let's not even go in there with the Northern Ireland Immunity Bill. I mean, that's going to open up more of a can of worms for lawfare. So, of which probably I might get another knock on the door.
Yeah,
I, out of my 24-year service, I was deployed 11 years in total.
yeah,
So whether I'm a witness to something else that has gone on, who knows what they might come up with next?
yeah,
And why should any of us as veterans who have served our country with honour and pride be fearful of a constant knock on the door because of the constant changes to our deployment remit by legislation that the government keep churning out? And I think it's time, as a veteran community, to just get together and say no more. We need to stop.
yeah. And that's the thing. It's the power in the numbers, and setting up that community. I think for you is so important. Not only just to support each other, but as a collective, then to be a voice heard en masse. That enough's enough. Stop making this a political hot potato, throwing it around, playing with people's lives, playing with people's emotions and mental health. Just land on one side of the fence or other and have done with it. Don't keep
Yeah,
throwing it in and out, in and out, in and out, because, depending on the mood of the nation, depending on what's happening politically, just make a decision and just stick by it. Um, and, that uncertainty, like you say, it changes all the time. That's also feeding a lot of the pain that people are suffering with this, because you don't know, do I get on with my life, do I take that promotion, am I going to be okay for the next few years, what's my next few years even going
yeah,
to look like? And like you say, you've done 11 years deployed in numerous countries, so it's like, well, am I just going to get a knock on the door every week for each one, you know
yeah.
for the next foreseeable, or can I actually put it to bed and get on with my life? Make a decision. Just make a
I know.
decision on what you're going to
And
do.
and I know there's a community out there that need support, because I've had some extraordinary messages sent to me via LinkedIn about their knocks on the door and that they're not ready to come forward yet because they've been humiliated in the workplaces. They've only just started a job, for example, and someone's come in and gone straight to their bosses and said, oh, we need to speak to XYZ. And that in itself just puts a question mark of who we've just employed. They're finding people through your pensions, through the pension office addresses and things like that, underhanded way of contacting you and getting hold of you.
Yeah.
And then but equally we need to, we go back to say, we have veterans that fall through the cracks. And I absolutely understand that we need some form of better tracking of us, whether that be through regimental associations or something. I think that's where you'd feel more comfortable. I think my details, somebody ringing me up every 3, 6, 12 months when I first get out, how you doing? Everything all right? Like a caseworker type thing. I think that's a really great idea,
Yeah.
as long as your data's been used for the correct reasons. But then to come and out also give you data and then, oh, well, that's easy. We can find that person there. We'll give them a nice knock on the door. That's where they're at. I know it's easy enough to track people down through electoral registers and stuff like that. But, that also will be in the back of my mind. When you see these initiatives now saying, oh, yeah, the military is after finding your data, getting your data, which you think is a good thing. But also it can be used
Yeah.
to get you to come and give you that knock on the door, or to send you that letter. Who knows? But yeah, going back to trying to forge a community, I'm still working on it. I'm still working on a couple of other initiatives at the moment with a couple of
Very good.
ex-military colleagues, which I've shared with you, which is really exciting if it comes off, where it will have a reach a point for veterans and serving people at the touch of a button. I think that would be an incredible sort of launch if we can do that, and it will be able to be supportive of veterans from suffering from substance abuse to homelessness to LawFare. But more on that another time, and hopefully you'll invite me back
Oh
to
yeah.
talk about it when
Yeah,
it does
I'm
come up, when
excited
it does
about
come to
this
fruition.
already. So we need to do a
Yeah,
deep dive once you're up and running, because I
but
think it's an incredible idea.
for anyone that's listening, and I'm sure many people reach out to you, what's important out there is to have your little tribe around you, to have someone to talk to have, they don't have to be, I mean, I've got, some good friends, small circle. They're not literally next door. So it's always like, this is a great thing about social media, isn't it? And FaceTiming and things like that. You can actually be present with somebody. And if you haven't got that, and you're in that position now where you're not feeling great and you need someone to talk to or to reach out to, please do. I have many years of experience now going through and admitting that I need help, and also having some good people that will tell me when I do. I think it might be right. I think you might be needed to go into your counselling session again, Rach.
Yeah.
And that's what you need. And thankfully, I had, after I appeared on the telly a few weeks ago on GB News, I have to give him a big shout out. Hugh Milroy is the CEO of Veterans Aid, an incredible organisation that helps with homelessness for veterans. And I initially had done some fundraising for him many years ago, and he rang me up and said, "Rach, are you okay?" And that's was really meant a lot. And he said, I'm gifting you some counselling sessions because I think you need to talk about it. And it's right, I have a session later on today with them, which is just because you're starting to talk about things again that you'd thought were okay, but actually now more emotions have come to the front, which is, the disappointment, the sort of with the government, the duplicity, the all the sort of things that you are just, you that betrayal is coming back,
Yeah.
that feeling, and as we talk about moral injury as a result of lawfare, it doesn't go away. Sometimes moral injury can just sit there and then it will pop out
Yeah.
because something will trigger it. But
Yeah.
ultimately, the back of you are suffering. A lot of people are suffering with the moral injury as a result of these enduring investigations and other things that has affected them through medical sort of discharges and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know, there is a community of people that are needing help, and it should be afforded to them. And you know, it was great that Hugh reached out to me and just showed his care. He cared basically, and I took him up on the offer. It's always good to talk. So you know what, if you feel it and you're unhappy and you don't know where to go, then there is some great organisations like Combat Stress, you know, who have great counsellors out there that will help you navigate that system and navigate you to a better place. And if not, you've got you, and somebody can message me, you know. And I hope whoever's listening to this has something, you know, they get some benefit from it or some insight to what it was like
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
to go through what I went through.
It's so important, and I'm a full advocate of the therapy side of things. I've had it myself. I still do to this day. Every month, I'll have a session because I'm good for now, but not. It's not going to always be forever. There's going to be peaks. There's going to be
Yeah.
troughs, and that's why they're there.
And it's
Um,
future proofing yourself, isn't it, as well? It's
it's,
making
I think
yourself bulletproof. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's understanding yourself again. And I think this is, especially when we're very good at boxing things up and getting on. When we leave, those boxes start to fall off the shelf and open themselves up without us really having much say in it. And there's no shame in getting that help, because at the end of the day, we're very complex people. With the careers we've had and what we've done and things we've seen and what we've been exposed to, we become very, very complex people. And in no way should you be on your own trying to figure that out. It's going to take a little bit of help and talking it through and trying to understand. And I think that's the biggest thing for me is it's understanding yourself again. When these boxes start to open and you've actually got to process it, it's so complicated, and you're not going to be able to do it on your own. You need to talk to
No.
people and get that help and get those sessions in. And yeah, it might feel weird initially and you might be a bit adverse to it, and it's going to be tough. But for me, I've had it consistently now for about 2 or 3 years. And I actually really look forward to my sessions now, because
Mm.
some weeks we don't really talk about much, or some months we don't really talk about much. Other months I'm like, thank God you're here, because I'm really
Yeah.
struggling to process this and I don't know what the hell is going on, because I can't fathom it. And it just needs that person to go, well, do you remember when we spoke about this? And you
Yeah.
start to go, oh yeah, so that's why that's happening. And it just helps you understand yourself a bit more, because you know we've not led the normal life, let's face it. We've not done the
Don't
normal
think any
stuff.
of us are. Yeah. But it's proven, I think, that men don't like to talk to counsellors and or
Yeah.
don't like talking much about their feelings, and we get that. But that's why maybe having like that battle buddy or a
Yeah.
friend, somebody that they can talk to as well, helps initially. But don't just suffer in silence. As I've seen in past couple of weeks, there's been a couple of other people commit suicide, and it just saddens me so much that they took that course of action, and we should be able to be more supportive and identify those people in crisis earlier, to
Yeah.
be able to or find those indicators and then try and do some immediate intervention before it becomes too late. And yeah, we must come together as a community now, and get our voices louder, and get the officers of Veterans Office to listen and make changes, because we've got all this money apparently and all these shiny new initiatives, but it doesn't seem to be reaching those that need it.
Yeah.
Whether that's serving individuals or whether it's the veteran community, but it needs to change. And I think now we've got lots of voices having podcasts like this, and having some of the community groups that I've seen on LinkedIn. I think people are now coming together more, realizing that, instead of these silo sort of activities with regards to what's been going on with the IAT, with Northern Ireland veterans, come together as a group, louder as one,
Yeah.
and make change happen.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So, to sort of finish off, Rachel, what would be your sort of dream aim in the end? What would what needs to happen for you to step away and go, it was worth it. I'm glad I went through all that in the end, because that was the aim. That's what I wanted to achieve.
To put a stop to all these investigations, to put a stop to the Northern Ireland and Immunity Bill. Do a U-turn. You're good at that at the moment. Parliament, government, do another U-turn on that. Protect the veteran community. Don't be aligned to all these. We serve, we deploy. Investigations happen whilst you're on deployment to make sure everything was done appropriately. Then don't come at us years later to go, you remember that incident 10 years ago? Well, actually, because we've now signed up to this particular EU,
Yeah.
I can't remember what the human right, ECHR, is it?
Yeah.
That we're now going to open up an investigation on you, because what you did now was illegal, but it was legal at the time. You know what? It just needs to stop.
Yeah.
Draw a line under the whole lot. Have better processes in place when you're actually deployed to make sure if incidents that happen, they're reported timely, they're investigated at the time, they are redlined, stamped, done.
Yeah.
Not years and years later.
Yeah.
And these initiatives, these initiatives that they have, op valor, op courage, have people in those positions that know what they're doing, that have faced have faced hardship, have faced the difficulties, that are able to shape programs properly, and that it gets to the individuals in crisis. We shouldn't have all these charities out there doing all this work that actually the government should be doing. So yeah, not a long list, but quite a bit of a list. And to have a one joined up approach, instead of it all being so siloed.
Yeah.
And all this paperwork that guys have to do. So, it's the little charities that seem to be picking up the guys in crisis, because by the time they've gone through this, fill this form in, their lives are in turmoil now. I always used to recall, before we finish off, I used to recall when I was at the Rifles, I used to say to my team, look, if a rifleman comes through the door and you're busy doing audit or you're doing whatever, let them deal with them now. Don't send them away, because they'll not come back. Get to what they need. And it's similar. When you're in crisis, you're going to make that one call because you need it.
Yeah.
You're not going to come back 2 days later or 3 days later. You're ringing up because you need help now. Not feeling like... We understand that the processes and paperwork needs to be completed, but do the intervention and then follow it up with the paperwork thereafter.
Yeah.
Because we talked about it before the call. I would class myself quite, now as a functioning vet. I've got a job, I've got a home, I'm paying my bills. But at any time I could dip, and become non-functioning, as in no job, need help, gonna lose my home. And you need to be able to be signposted to that. Whereas now, you've got a community of non-functioning vets that are going from prison to drugs, to homelessness, to, going through domestic violence, whatever it might be. They need to be able to find a place, a hub, signposted immediately, not go through layers and layers of different searches on websites. Let's be fair, if you can't do it on your phone, they're not interested. They're not going to find it, are they?
Yeah.
So
I don't want to end up with con artists either, because there are those that sit out there,
exactly
getting the money, and leeching off this
Yeah.
situation, because they know it's, like you say, it's so siloed. Where do you go? What do you do? Who do you talk to? Which is best? What is for me?
Yeah.
Like, there's so many questions. And like I say, that one phone call, that probably took a lot. It could have taken weeks to get there, and it to have
Yeah.
it ring out, or you go to a bot and go through a massive menu. It's like, right, okay, this is it. This is what I've got to deal with, kind of situation. But no, it's been really great talking to you, Rachel. I mean, we message quite a bit, and I'm constantly seeing stuff on LinkedIn, and really sort of following your story and your campaign, because I think it is a really, really, really important one. And as you say, it could actually eventually save people's lives from them just disappearing and not coming back. Because it's not fair. It's not fair to keep doing this to people time and time and time again. And I really hope you do get that wish list at the end of it, and you can sit somewhere nice with a glass of champagne and go, yeah, we got there in the end. We did it.
Well, it's one team. It's a team effort, isn't it?
Yeah,
I'm just quite happy to be the voice for it at the moment. But there's lots of people working tirelessly to get some resolution on the lawfare, especially the main concern at the moment, the Northern Ireland Immunity Bill. So yeah, we need to join forces and just put a stop to it.
yeah,
But it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you today, and I do hope you get some good feedback,
yeah.
and I do hope I can come back on again and
Oh,
talk about
absolutely.
some other bits.
Oh, I'm so excited for what you've got coming up. So you're definitely coming on to talk about that. But
Brilliant.
thank you very much, Rachel. And
No
hopefully
worries.
people start getting in touch, and we can build that network. Fab.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.